Alright, so I was on a drive the other day and two songs came on back to back, both by NBA Youngboy. The first one being No Time and the second one being Through the Storm. And for whatever reason, I started to think about what kind of animation I would make for NBA Youngboy if the opportunity came across. So when I got home, I started modeling our character, NBA Youngboy. Most of that footage, I actually forgot to hit record until I got to the hair, but I did do a sculpting process. Our first set of issues that we ran into for this was the particle system revolving around the hair. I was having issues trying to get my hair system to be exactly where I wanted to be and more precise. Using this new method, I was able to cut the hair and trim it exactly how I wanted it, but then came the part of making braids. I never really made braids before. I've like tried a few times, but nothing very good. So I watched a few other tutorials, which I was able to make some really nice looking braids and be able to control them. At this point, I chose to manually place the braids because they were kind of in specific locations. I didn't want that many on there in general. Next up was time to add some shape keys so we could bring Youngboy to life a little bit. I ended up making him frown to make him look a little angry. Also did the same thing with the eyebrows to once again give us an angry face, and then as well with the eyelids so we can make him blink. I also quickly threw in a few of his face tattoos, definitely not all of them, and not as detailed. Before I really got started with animation, I wanted to get our clothing set up to follow our armature at the very least. And then I brought in a Desert Eagle asset to pair up with the left hand bone. I randomly also saw in a picture that Youngboy has a horse, so I looked up on Sketchfab, I believe I got this horse off of. And luckily it was already animated. I think it was like $10. So I just took Youngboy's armature and then paired it up with the horse's armature using automatic weights. Actually, I take that back. I think I paired it up with the middle backbone of the horse, which led to Youngboy already getting that like rocking motion of being on a horse. But it didn't look the greatest, so I added a few adjustments, as well as just some basic hand movement for when he's going to be shooting the gun. I knew going into the scene that I wanted to do a 360 view. I guess, is that the right way to say that? I knew I wanted the camera to revolve 360 degrees around our horse and then kind of like a gunshot being shot towards the camera. For this closer up shot specifically, I wanted to make Youngboy look like he was shooting the gun, like, I don't know, angrily, as well as blinking. I feel like if you shoot a gun and you don't blink, it's kind of crazy. Something I didn't really think about when I first thought of like the gunshot idea was actually putting like a muzzle flash and muzzle smoke. Now I didn't do anything that crazy with this, but this was completely new to me using a displace modifier with a different texture to give us that like muzzle flash look was new to me. Could definitely have made it probably better, but it definitely works for now. Another challenging section I had for this animation was having the camera follow the bullet after the gunshot. Not only following the actual bullet was an issue, but having it flow with my original like 360-ish, probably like 275-ish degree rotation of the camera. Having those two flow together like one after the other was kind of difficult for me. I was using damped tracked constraints on the camera and then having an empty on the bullet as well as Youngboy. After being frustrated for a while, I ended up going to Sketchfab and getting one more skeleton in which I took a chunk out of the forehead and then made it into a bunch of pieces and animated that into like a breaking skull in which our bullet is going to go through. After that, it was time to revisit our clothing simulation because yeah, it ended up taking some time and a bunch of trial and error to get a sim that I liked. There were still a few issues of clipping our original mesh body, even with the collision, but I just ended up deleting those parts of our original mesh, and you can't even tell that there's anything missing. Lastly, it was time for me to set up the setting, which I just wanted like a snowy forest, hills in the background, trees. Cool little technique I learned is that there's already like a built-in snow modifier thing, I guess. So I just took some of my tree assets and then selected the amount of snow and the height of the snow I wanted added onto those, and now we have snowy trees. Put those in a particle system on our hills. Now we have a great background. Brought in a cloudy HDRI and then put in a volumetric cube for a little bit of fog. I was getting this weird bug with my tree particle systems where they were like dancing around and I couldn't figure it out. I still don't know what the issue was because I didn't touch anything that would do that, I'm pretty sure. So what I did is I just copied the entire project into a new file and the trees didn't dance anymore. I don't know what happened there. But so next up was to add in some snow, which is just another detail that brings our whole scene together to sell the whole thing. Super easy to make, and there's plenty of tutorials out there. Something new for me also that I learned is using dynamic paints and putting that brush selection on our horse and then the canvas as our snow area in order to give us a trail for our horse. When our horse moves, it's digging like a little trough, which is what would happen if a horse was running through the snow. I thought it was a cool little detail. It's not perfect, but I learned a lot and I think it looks pretty cool. And lastly, added some lighting. Just played around with some different colors until I got something that I liked. Once I finished our little snowy area, our snowy mountain, Gravedigger Mountain, it was time to make our underworld scene. This was pretty simple. I pretty much just followed the same process, but even easier. I ended up making some clouds out of some volumetrics and putting like a weird noise texture on it to give us some of that like foggy or fumes look. As for the fire and the smoke on the horse, the skeleton horse, I'm using the Chaos Fire shader, and it's a ton of fun to play around with. And once our two scenes were done and all rendered, I brought them both into After Effects and did some rotoscoping on the skull break and looped them together. And here's our final result. I hope you guys enjoyed this little look into how I made this NBA Youngboy animation, and stay tuned for more.